Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder. In this unprecedented time, I wanted to continue the podcast and bring you the voices of the people who can help us all better understand what's happening in our industry and how to better prepare for when to start to produce again. Today is May 27th, and we welcome Tess Rockers and Jennifer Davick. Tess is a producer at Evolution Bureau, and Jennifer is a food director, DP, and still photographer on our roster. I've invited them both here because together they created 4 motion spots for a cookware client, and I thought it would be helpful to hear how the process unfolded. Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning. Hi.
Hi, I know it's morning for you guys, nice and early on the West Coast. I'm actually on the East Coast today, and it was such a glorious day, and I took a walk on the beach, which I can't believe. It was so beautiful. 6 a.m.
Wow.
I know, it was nice. It was a bit of a treat.
It's finally cooling down here. It was very warm yesterday. A little too warm for the city dwellers.
I heard that, and I was really happy to not be there because that's kind of miserable in San Francisco when it's like that.
Yeah, just no one's prepared for it. So
I know. It was pretty hot, but then it cools down in the evening and it's chilly this morning. All of our windows are open and it's just, it's back.
We're back.
Yeah.
Although, Tess, I have to say what you just said, no one's prepared for it, is kind of the theme of 2020, I think.
That is very true.
That's funny.
Well, thanks for being here today. And I think this project is the timing to talk about this is really relevant because so many people I've been talking to out there in the world are either attempting this, have tried it, are interested in doing it. So I think this will be really helpful and insightful for both photographers and also art producers who are trying to propose this to their clients. So I think a good place to start, Tess, might be to have you talk a little bit about how this project came about and how you knew that you wanted to, shoot it remotely.
Yeah. So everyone right now, I think there's a lot of COVID response advertising happening. And I think everyone wants to be a part of it in some way, shape, or form. I think a lot of it started, 2 or 3 months ago, whenever this all kind of began. But I think everyone else is just trying to play catch up and do something. And so our client, and it was a very new client to me because I have been at Evolution Bureau. I think I'm at week 5 now. So it was jump right in. Creative has already been sold, and let's just kind of go with it. So in that, it was kind of quick trying to figure it out and see if it was even possible, knowing that at that moment in time, we're still on technically lockdown or shelter in place, but at that moment it felt much more locked. So I think we had to figure out a way, the client is local, they're in Vallejo. We could get product to someone in the Bay Area, and then could we shoot with a skeleton crew and just kind of figure it out? And I think shooting remote and having the remote call-in or Zoom or whatever we were going to do was kind of our only option. So that's when I started reaching out to people, which I think is how I found you guys, obviously.
And do you feel like at that moment you were kind of inventing the wheel or reinventing the wheel? Had you ever done anything like this before, or were you confident that it could work?
I mean, I had definitely, I think the closest thing that we'd done before, that I had produced before, was either sending kind of briefs out to influencers or kind of influencer photographers, and then you kind of send it out to a couple and see what you get. But this was the first time that we were really trying to have it be directed by creatives and supervised. So I think I was definitely just trying to figure out what was possible. And I think also trying to figure out who was operating at that moment, because I think a lot of people were taking a pause and just trying to figure it out later, maybe, and not try and rush into.
How did you find that?
Through your lovely Instagram and Create and Play.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Is how that happened. I literally, I think it was through Instagram, and you posted something about Create and Place on your story. And I was like, well, this is probably going to be a good place for multiple. Obviously, it was multiple reps kind of coming in on one landing site thing. So I just went through it with kind of the brief in mind, and then shot a couple of the PDFs over to creatives, and then we went from there. So
yeah, I think that's, it's interesting how this process is unfolding. Like yours was a food specific project, right? So you
Yeah.
weren't looking for talent per se. I know there was hand talent there, but I think the general create and place kind of briefs that we're seeing are so talent driven, and which is so unique and different than how we're used to, kind of producing and choosing photographers. So it was kind of nice. I thought that when you went to that site, you were looking for an actual, you needed to find a certain style. So
Right.
that was kind of cool. Okay, so things are changing by the day in terms of what's possible in on production. And at this point, which I think was mid to late April, what was the most important thing for you on this shoot?
I think for us, the most important thing was they wanted to feel relevant, but also the whole point of this was also to bring the brand into a moment where they feel more approachable and, I don't want to say user friendly, but like they've been so about the nonstick and all the things that the tools that they put into it and the different rivets and things, and it's been very like product focused in a way that felt like there was no human interaction with a lot of their creative. And so I think not only was this a COVID kind of response piece, but it was also trying to get some human interaction with the products and not have it just feel very much like kind of those overused product demos. So it was really important to capture small moments in the cooking process and kind of make it feel real. So we didn't want it to feel overproduced, which kind of was perfect for our situation because can we get a food stylist in the room? Can Jennifer do it all? How are we sourcing ingredients and how are we delivering the product to set? A lot of those things were kind of up in the air. So I think it was important for us to make it feel like something that was produced during this time, but also that was kind of relevant for the brand itself because they were trying to be more approachable and have more of a human interaction feel to their creative.
So when you spoke with Jennifer, and Jennifer, you can chime in too here, what were some of the solutions that Jennifer offered, to help pull this off and also make it feel the way that you just described?
Well, I think she's had a lot of experience with cook. I mean, to be fair, like we weren't looking for it to be perfect, right? So she was like, we cook a lot at home. She's obviously been on set with a million different food stylists and kind of learned a lot of things. And she was like, I'm ready to try it and see kind of where we go. So, and also she offered up a lovely hand model.
That's right.
Hand model / tech / producer in Tanner. So that was helpful. I think she was just very open to helping us figure it out. So I don't know that there was an exact list of like things that we were going to achieve. It was just like, we're going to do it and we're going to get there somehow.
Right. I think what was so cool about this project was that it was exactly what I love to do the most, which is humanizing, a product through food. So it was exactly what a lot of the work that I do when it's quote normal times is all about. It's taking something beyond a feature and it's making you feel something. And so what we were being asked to do was what we do every day in our real lives all the time, which is pretty much cook every, meal. And we love cooking together. So it was just kind of a great opportunity to see what was possible with a lower lift production. And it was really great. I also felt because Tess and her team were so open to having it look and feel that way in the visuals, they really wanted it to feel as if it was a home cook making food with this particular product. And that's exactly what we did. And so we were able to just find those little nuanced moments. Of course, there's all of the challenges of getting it right. But we had, we were both really open. And I think that was the best part about this.
You mentioned a lower lift production, and I've been having so many conversations with other photographers and producers and what that means. And obviously it's less people on set. or less people as part of the production. And the one thing that keeps rising to the top in those conversations is the idea of creative flexibility and how important that is when there are less people on set.
Mm-hmm.
Were you finding that you were doing some experimenting while on set, or were you finding that everything had been really scripted out ahead of time, or maybe a little bit of both?
They had a very specific set of spots that they wanted to achieve. And then what we were able to do was talk about how we would feel about doing those. So we kind of discussed a few different types of foods, and I was able to talk through, that's going to be more difficult, or here are the challenges. Here, I think this is going to set us up to win, set us up to do this, to do more takes on this. And it's an easier, this food is more forgiving. So we had a lot of conversations about what they were trying to achieve from a big picture, but then maybe making choices that would help us get there easier.
And who was on set with you?
Just me and Tanner. So we were in, it was a different moment than it is right now. I think things are starting to loosen up a little bit. But it was the full shelter in place moment. And we really were only working with the family, and it was basically just he and I.
Mm-hmm.
And was he the hand talent and helped you style, or did you do the styling, or you just kind of like cooked like you were at home?
Well, we treated it like a normal shoot, in the sense that we needed to speak to every crew member and their role, but we needed to take on, each of us dividing it up to do that. So because we didn't have crew on set, all of the roles and the tasks had to be done by two people in a more linear time frame and a more linear fashion. So things took longer. So like with any food job, we had to shop for the food, prep the food, pick up the gear, prep the gear, get the props, organize the shot list in the day in terms of this shot will take this much time. And Tess was really great about helping us make a schedule that allowed for us to consider the fact that nobody was on set, so we had to think about, okay, this is when we're going to actually prepare the food for this first setup. Then we're going to have a conversation about what we've set up and how we're approaching it. Then we're going to bring the client in, so that the agency now has already seen what we're doing and everyone's set up to feel comfortable and facilitate their role. So it was definitely very challenging, but it was empowering. And so Tanner helped me with all of it. He is a writer. He's not been on set and productions a lot. He's a producer of podcasts and a writer. So I think what he got insight into was, damn, this is a long day. This is hard.
And Tess, how did it work on your end? Everything moved a little slower on the, set end. Did you have to set your expectations for your client and your team around that? Make sure everybody was available, like knew what was happening, or did everybody expect it to kind of just run as smoothly as it normally does?
Well, yeah, I think that was part of my challenge, honestly, was that there were a lot of expectations on like, oh, this is just a normal shoot, but we're just not there. And it's like, well, it can't be a normal shoot because we're not there. So we kind of had to figure out, I just decided that the best way to do it was to have our creatives on available the entire time as they would be normally, and then kind of set up these check-ins I think we did every hour and a half, basically. So we had 4 setups and we allowed ourselves kind of an hour to get them locked, and then had a half an hour of Zoom call with the client to either review what we had shot or kind of show them where we were at currently and shooting. So it was definitely interesting because I think there were a couple moments where the clients wanted something a little different, or the creatives wanted something a little different. And we were, there's only so much time that we had, and we did have to get through everything. But we didn't have any of those moments where it was like, scrap it and I need a new countertop and I need a different thing. I think everyone was pretty lenient in agreeing to things kind of the day before, and the clients were super good about not being honestly too crazy or nitpicky about the food, and about kind of, oh, I'm sure we captured it, I think we can move on. even they approved a couple just knowing that we were attempting it and then didn't actually
Right.
the final. They saw the setup and we recorded butter for like, I don't know, 45 minutes.
I know. That was the hardest one.
That was the
It was so
hardest one.
funny. It
And
was
it
the one we thought would be the easiest.
and it was definitely the hardest, but it's funny because I think we got it before we ran out of a certain type of butter, we locked it in. But it was funny because that one in particular, the clients were they were like, I like the setup. I like where you guys are going with it. Once you feel like you got it, you can move on. So I think that was important through the whole thing. They had a lot of trust and they were participating, but I think not to the extent that they would normally be on set all day and see kind of everything and work within the process. So I think that really helped us out. But I do think there were moments of like, can I get my creatives on the phone? I was new to everyone, so I had just gotten everyone's cell phone numbers basically, and trying to contact everyone. Is it Slack? Am I texting them? Are we doing FaceTime? Are we doing Zoom? Are we logging back into the same Zoom, or do we have a different link? Some of that was definitely in the moment a little messier than I think I would have liked it to be.
Right. Yeah. But I thought you did great. Honestly, just jumping in. I really was so happy that you were the producer on this because I was so your instincts are just spot on, so I think you were really able to anticipate a lot of things happening just in the way that people were responding to the schedule even. So, I mean, I think you just really prompted good discussions, and you also prompted when to have a side discussion that maybe we didn't need to be in on. And I thought that was really helpful too. So like you were workshopping some of the ways that, there were some conversations happening between the agency and the client that I thought were really important to have. And you were taking those offline.
Yeah. I think too, some of that it's interesting because not only did we have like our day-to-day clients in these review sessions, but we had a product client, and then we had kind of the larger overall, not day-to-day, kind of our day-to-day's boss also on a couple of them. And so it was kind of interesting because none of these people would have been on set normally, right? Maybe they would have been reviewing from an email or just kind of seen a couple things, but really you're not going to have, I think we had 7 clients at one point on one of the reviews. And so it's a lot of people chiming in. And
right.
For sure, I think some of those conversations had to be, okay, let's just talk about that over here. Because we had to kind of keep it moving. So
I completely agree. I think what was neat about it was that we had different channels. So the way that the schedule was set up, we had real prep time. We had time to talk directly to the agency without the clients. And then we would all agree that we were going to jump over to this other channel. I think we used FaceTime for our internal discussions. And then we used Zoom for when the client would join in, so that there was not the concern that somebody would be overhearing something that they shouldn't hear just yet.
Right.
So that was really good. And since we've had our shoot, I've been able to really get that system and that process more honed in, so that it's going to be literally more seamless to literally log into the session. And we were jerry-rigging it a little bit because we were learning how to do this, in the moment. But I think we did a pretty good job with separating those two audiences, just so that there was some real safe circle time with the agency and Tanner and myself to talk through some things that were really happening on set.
Yeah. Well, I think that you've brought up so many good points, one of which is the organization of it ahead of time, right? Everyone just kind of throws out, oh, remote capture, live streaming, right? And you think that like it's just happens and you're magically there at the shoot. But really what is required for the people who are listening and trying to figure it out on their own is you do have to have a workflow in place that allows for channels for the studio to be talking amongst themselves, then the studio to bring the agency in, and then for the agency to be able to bring the client in. So it sounds like you guys worked that out, and I think it would be helpful for people when they think about what their on-set experience would be like, is to think about that part of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it would be helpful for sure to have, and we were, everyone was still trying to figure out the remote capture situation and how we live stream and kind of how that works. But I think regardless, if you moving forward, even if we had a live stream of what was happening in camera, I think we would need those offline channels and conversations, just like you would have on set where you pull someone over and have a conversation over here, just to make sure you're aligned before you bring other people into that conversation. I think those channels definitely have to be set up regardless of if people can see what's happening in camera the whole time.
So just to clarify, did you guys do remote capture or live streaming or both?
What we did was live streaming, and I set it up like a normal shoot, because all of this talk of virtual shooting, in the end, it's really still just another shoot. And so what that means is that we needed a client monitor.
Yeah.
And so I needed to be able to have a monitor that normally I would have a first camera AC who would be a focus, basically my also capturing, I would be in charge of capturing the actual camera move. And that person would be focusing on the subject. But we didn't have that. So it was really, we were really doing it in a much more lower lift way, and yet we still needed a client monitor because we needed to have another way for the agency and the client to see what we were doing, because they can't be up on the, they can't be up at the camera with me. So we were able to have a phone face the client monitor and see as if the phone was a person, and we just live streamed that.
Mm-hmm.
Moving forward, I would actually do that a little bit differently. I would actually live stream directly from my camera,
Right.
so that everyone could log in and see what the camera was seeing. And then we would also utilize cell phones and things like that to do the normal conference call and Zoom calls, which are now also you can log in. So we would basically be using a couple of computers to log into different sessions. One session would be the live stream, and one session would be the team of people talking about the live stream.
So do you oversee the creatives or the team or the clients, Jennifer? Do you see their faces?
Yes, I could see them on the cell phone, just like you see in a Zoom call, a gallery of faces or people talking. That's what we could see. And then we could also point our camera to, instead of it looking at us, the camera was looking at the client monitor.
Because I would think that would be important, right? Because you're used to feedback on set and you're seeing someone's reaction in their face. And without that, I think that would
Right.
be hard.
Yeah, I think one thing I should have added just in the last description was that I think a third stream is important, and that is the global view of, I jokingly, Heather and I were talking yesterday about what we call the doggy cam, just the camera that allows you to see what's happening in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you can take this as granular as you want. You could have a styling stream or a prop stream, just basically a camera C that is looking at a wider view of what's going on, so that you could theoretically walk over to it and, show somebody what you're doing. I think distilling what we actually do on a real, normal shoot, it was interesting because you have to really just deconstruct that and then think about why each of those elements are really important on a shoot. And they're there for a reason. So we need to have potentially 3 cameras set up: a wide camera, a camera that sees what the actual shoot camera is seeing, and then a conference call camera that is allowing us to talk to each other.
I'm hearing people talk about a communications manager role. And maybe this is more important on a larger set, right? Or a bigger production with more people around and trying to accomplish more in a day, maybe. But that one person that can kind of funnel the information and translate from the set to the agency to the client, so that there's not a lot of chatter and back and forth happening. Do you see a value in a role like that? Or do you feel like that's a person that isn't really needed at that for what you're doing?
I felt like Tess played that role for us on this shoot. I mean, really, I really was so grateful that she was the personality that she is, because you were truly on both of our mindsets, if that makes sense. You were able to put yourself in our shoes and you would say, wait a minute, I think that we need to give them a minute to reset up for that if we want to change this, because the storyboards were more vague and they were purposely vague.
Right.
So you were able to defend kind of the just hang on a second, give them a minute, and vice versa, when I think you would hear the conversations happening that maybe needed to go offline.
Yeah. I think that's kind of an important point, though. I think it would be interesting bringing someone into the loop that hadn't been a part of all kind of the pre-conversations or the creative development. Like, I think a lot of that is on either on the agency producer, or if there's a line producer, to kind of help with those conversations. But I think you need to know some of the players kind of before you would be relevant at that job, right? So a lot of it is just knowing people's communication styles or kind of being the interpreter of the moment. And I think possibly hiring just like another crew member that maybe doesn't necessarily know either the agency side or the client as well. I think it would be a difficult role for them to play, or kind of, yeah, you can have someone keeping the schedule, but I think in terms of keeping the conversation going and making sure the right conversations are happening, they're going to need to be a little bit more informed.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like that person could just show up that day and be
Yeah.
effective.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you need an empathetic, in the know coordinator.
There you go.
And and in this case, that was Tess. And I think that it takes the personality recipe. It's like any shoot. This, we're kind of wired for this. This is, to me, what food shooting is all about. It's intimate and it's communicative, and food never does exactly what you want it to do. It's a very organic process. And sometimes you just have to do it a few times because something spectacular will happen. And you need someone who understands and believes that too.
Right. And I think too, there were some earlier moments, maybe not on set, but kind of when we were prepping this whole thing around kind of creative expectations that needed to happen. I know there was a moment where we were like, for some reason, they really needed a marble countertop and we were going to have to move a piece of marble, and knowing that we only had 2 people on set to help move a giant piece of marble was probably not going to be the most time, it's not going to be worth it. And I think having those conversations earlier on, and kind of, I don't know that helped set all of the expectations, but I think moments like that in the kind of pre-pro really, I think, either made the client or creative kind of aware of like the situation we were working in. Like, oh, we actually don't have more hands. We can't just pull someone else in. And so I think, yes, as we're opening up, maybe a few more crew members would be nice to have, because I think we were a little limited in that space. But I think too, everyone just has to go into it knowing that it's going to be a little different, and kind of expecting the challenges, I guess, and being a little more open to how we get there. So,
yeah, I totally agree. I think we had a really good prep day, and maybe we needed another. So we had, I think if we had had 3 days so that we were able to do a true pre-light and prep day and a true food prep day, shopping and prep day. Instead, we did 1 prep day and 1 shoot day.
Yeah.
And what we were able to do though in that time was really good, because we kind of choreographed the day as if we were shooting, and we were able to pull, the surfaces that we needed. We would move the camera to left and right, and we had 2 sets set up basically that were in one zone, if that makes sense. So it was all about a cooktop, but on one side of the cooktop was one set and scene, and on the right side of the cooktop was another set and scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so choosing not to use marble meant that we didn't have to take some of that precious time that we would be preparing the food and literally move marble and move another surface. We were able to really make choices about what props we were going to most likely use. And we could always tweak it here and there, but we really made bigger choices on the prep day.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So it sounds like communication obviously is key. So is pre-production, and really giving the time needed for pre-production. I think a lot of times clients and agencies don't see a lot of the pre-production that happens behind the scenes, but and correct me if I'm wrong, in this new way of shooting, even if we're adding a few more people to it, the taking the time to figure out what the dance is going to be like on set and prep and be, ready for when you are trying to be as efficient as you can is really important.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And to that point, I would even say having just like a moment of whatever the channel you're going to be using, whether it's Zoom, whether it's a YouTube live stream, whatever it ends up being, I think there is some value in even just getting, maybe for the pre-pro, having a quick run through of one setup or how those conversations are going to happen, just so we didn't actually have anyone having issues logging into a Zoom or viewing it or how we were going to do it. But I think having kind of a tech moment as part of the pre-production, just to make sure everyone knows how they're supposed to be viewing things, would also be super helpful.
I totally agree. I think our pre-production day was really good because we kind of showed you what we were going to do, and in doing that, we tweaked what we were doing. And then in doing the shoot, we're kind of improving upon that whole process. So ideally, we want it to be as easy as possible, and we don't want to have a shoot hangover, because it's a long day and it's really intense, and your mind is working on lots of different fronts. So the ability to slow down for a minute, take a breather, and just say, okay, now I'm going to focus on this, is really the difference between manic and under control, so that space is important.
Before we kind of leave today, I wonder if there's any other kind of summary or advice, people who are trying to figure this out for the first time. What do is there anything you would have done differently? Any advice that you have that we could, parting words for them?
This is Jen. I would say that we now would live stream directly from the camera to a computer, which would then allow for people to log in and look at the stream happening in real time, versus watching a phone that is watching a client monitor, because there's a lot of glare and things like that. So I think we would solve the glare problem. Mm-hmm. We would get more granular maybe on storyboards and the nuances of what everyone's thinking needs to happen, because I think we had a loose idea and we were okay with that. But there were many different opinions on the call. Mm-hmm. that we would do. Each video was its own story, so I think it's like any shoot. We would ask more questions. I mean, I think this is my wrap summary of most shoots. When I look back on it, everything went really well, but I would ask more questions.
How about you, Tess?
Yeah, I think to the same extent, I think being a little more granular in our pre-production conversations and just making sure, I think we did need another prep day probably, and maybe more time between our pre-pro and our actual shoot would have been nice as well, just in the event clients needed more time to react or we needed more information. And I think what Jennifer was talking about, the in-camera visual is definitely very important. I know the way we did it was obviously not ideal, and we couldn't see true color, and there was some moments where it was like, I think that looks fine. And coming out of it, we definitely captured what we needed to, and everyone was very happy with it. But I think making sure that we're all very happy in the moment is super important.
Right.
And people were. But I think if we didn't have either creatives or clients that were as kind of forgiving of the process at that moment, then we definitely would have had to have it a little more buttoned up. And whether or not I think that does come from the storyboard being less general. I think we were trying to keep it general because we didn't know what we were going to be able to capture. But going forward, I think being less general would have actually probably helped us, just to make, there were a lot of opinions on the phone. So to say, this is what we agreed upon and this is what we're doing is easier when it's locked in prior. So
right.
That, and then, yeah, definitely having a live stream that is from the camera, I think would be very beneficial. So
I think everyone was really open, and everyone was in the moment that we were in, which was very pioneering. It felt, you know what I mean? It felt like, oh my gosh, we have to go to the grocery store. Are we going to be able to get these ingredients? is it going to be there? How many stores are we going to have to go to? And things are changing every week. But that was the overriding atmosphere surrounding the shoot. And I think everyone was incredibly open and feeling like, let's see what happens.
Right. Totally.
Well, this was really helpful. I loved hearing the mortem here. I don't always get to have that conversation between the art producer and the photographer, so that's kind of cool. But it also is, I think you nailed it when you said we're being pioneers. We're definitely trailblazing here, as are a lot of other people out there in the world. And I think being able to kind of share what we've learned is going to make everyone's next shoot and production even stronger. So thank you so much for this, guys. It was really fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is great. It's great to talk about all of these details and hear Tess talk about it too. We never get to do this in real life. I like it.
Postmortems on their own. Never.